I've got quite a few reptiles in my collection, but there are a certain few that I would never ever keep. For one reason or the other, maybe not my skill set, too difficult, too dangerous. Either way, these are the 5 reptiles that I'm never gonna keep. My name's Adam, this is Littlefoot, you're watching Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Before we start, I love all reptiles, and any of the reptiles in this list, it doesn't mean I don't like them, it just means that I don't want to take the risk or the hassle or the time in order to keep them. And all of these pets can be just that, pets. They could be good pets for you or good animals for you, and let's just get to it. Number 5, reticulated pythons. Now there is a few reasons why I wouldn't want a reticulated python, and it's funny because I actually do want a Burmese python, so why one and not the other? Well, reticulated pythons routinely get to over 20 feet long, and for me, it's too big for the space that I have. And we are moving in a couple weeks, so hit subscribe if you want to see the brand new reptile room. We're basically building it from the studs out. But even then, I think that a reticulated python needs something bigger than an 8x4 foot box. Just in my personal opinion, and I can't give that space to an animal. So rather than cramping something in something that's too small, there's no point in me having it. But let's suppose that you have the space. Let's suppose you have a 12 foot by 10 foot room, okay? And you have your reticulated python, you outfit it perfectly, waterproof the floor, the whole thing, and you've got the space. Well, do you have the money for the upkeep? Because these guys don't eat one rat every week or every other week. These guys will eat giant food items. So yeah, you can feed them giant rats, but you're gonna need to feed several of them per feeding, or you're gonna need to feed rabbits, or if you've got a 20-foot animal, maybe you're gonna wanna feed something like a stillborn pig. Do you have a place to get that? Or a chicken? Do you have a place to get chickens, fully feathered chickens? And can you afford to do that? Now, I should clarify, it doesn't get super duper expensive, but just talk to anybody. Go on a Reddit forum and ask people how much it costs to feed a retic. It's a heck of a lot more than, say, 5 ball pythons. It's cheaper to get 5 ball pythons than it is to get 1 reticulated python. So, size and cost, but one other thing. Just the danger factor. And I don't want to say that these guys are killers. A reticulated python's not going to jump out of its cage and try to kill you for the fun of it, okay? These guys, they have a high food drive. Let's suppose you're a regular sized human being, right? Or even a small person. You're 150, 160 pounds, right? Let's suppose that they think that you are food. If that snake who's 20 foot long wants to, it's going to be bad news bears for you. It's going to be your last day handling your snake. This is very rare, very uncommon, almost never ever happens, but it can, and it has, and that is why I'm bringing it up. So you just have to be careful. And what I'd recommend is that you have a second pair of hands. And although I do have my lovely girlfriend Michelle, who you've seen in these videos, she helps make them a lot of the time, I don't know that I would want to put her in a position to have to rescue me from a 20-foot snake. So it's just kind of a practicality thing. All right, you get the point. I'm probably never getting a retic, but maybe a Burmese one day? Maybe a Burmese one day. Number 4, Savannah monitors. Why wouldn't I want a Savannah monitor? Well, I've kind of talked about this in a lot of videos before. These guys are really difficult to tame down. I mean, in my opinion, I always say this, and this isn't a get this, don't get that video, but if you want something like a Savannah monitor, a big lizard that has a cool diet, looks prehistoric, whatever, black and white tegu is your best bet. A black and white tegu, I just think, is a better option for you. But just why wouldn't I get a Savannah monitor? Savannah monitors, although they're not as big as a black and white tegu, they need a similar space requirement. So if you want, something like this or an animal like this, you're going to need to either custom make it, right, out of wood or melamine or something like that, get someone to make it for you, or you have to buy something, usually a PVC enclosure. They don't really make glass ones that would fit, and that would really kind of be perfect for these animals. So I would always recommend a PVC, which you can get. There's a link in the description below if you want a 4 foot by 2 foot, or you need something like an 8 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot. Either way, Cages has got you covered. But I mean, do you want to spend $2,000 on an enclosure for your animal. That's one thing, right? I'm sure it's a one-time purchase, but what about the fact that now you have to swap out all the substrate in there, right? So it does become a little bit expensive with these guys. And do you have a 4 foot by 8 foot spot on your floor somewhere where you can house these things? And is it close enough to 5 outlets or whatever you're going to need? 2 basking bulbs, 2 UVBs, however you set it up, right? I'm not an expert on Savannah monitors. I'm just saying that it does take a little bit of doing to outfit the enclosure properly for Savannah. So even if you can handle the high, very high basking spots and the giant, big enclosure, and of course the deep substrate and everything that goes along with it, it's not rocket science.
It doesn't take rocket appliances
by any means, but I do think that it's more than most people could handle, and it's something that I don't really want to put the work in for because they're not handleable. Here's the difference. Here's why I want a black and white Tegu, because it is all those things. It needs a higher basking spot. It actually needs quite a bit more humidity, so it's a little bit more difficult than a Savannah Monitor in that sense. It needs a big enclosure, the whole thing. But you can handle them and they're fun and they don't want to murder you. Where I think with Savannah monitors, a Savannah monitor is basically just a lizard that's about 2-3 feet long that has the devil inside of it. I'm pretty sure that is how it works. If you want an animal that wants to eat your soul, a Savannah monitor is right for you. If you want a big lizard that is fun and cool, fun to feed, will kind of just chill out with you, can be your buddy, black and white Tegu. Is this turning into another one of those, I don't want this, I want this instead? No, let's make it that, why not? And one last thing, the diet isn't super duper easy, let's call it, for a Savannah monitor. It's a varied diet, so, you're gonna need to go out and get things like chicken hearts, and of course there's insects and stuff like that too, and it's just, it's a varied diet, and again, I don't think it's worth it because you put in all the work and they just want to eat your hands. Most of the time. Most of the time, some Savannah monitors can be tamed down, but this is super duper rare where Tegus are, it's much... Okay, we'll move on. Before we move on to number 3, we've got a new co-host because Littlefoot, she pooped on me, so Diamond's going to help me out with the rest of the video. Number 3, Chameleons. Now, a lot of you are scratching your head, especially if you've never watched any of these other videos. I do talk about Chameleons quite often. And the reason that I think Chameleons are a no-go for me personally is just simply because they do take a little bit of work, a little bit more work than I am willing to put in. And there's a little bit of risk because in my experience with the people that I personally know who have Chameleons, you're almost guaranteed to have to go to the vet eventually with the Chameleons. And I said this in a video very recently and I got a bunch of comments. Chameleons are awesome, but you're also right. I've taken my Chameleon to the vet twice and I've only had it for a year, And it's not that they're, you're a bad husbandryist. You care badly for your animal. It's not that you're ill-equipped to care for a chameleon. It's just they are a little bit more fragile and a little bit more difficult to care for than something like a bearded dragon, for example. Now, let's be very clear here, especially for the chameleon people. There are many species of chameleons, many different types, but some of them are a lot harder than others. So, for example, if I ever, you watch this video in a year and you're like, he's got a chameleon. And it'll probably be a Jackson's chameleon. Those, to me, are a little bit more... they're a little bit more enticing. They seem a little bit more attractive to me because they're a little bit hardier from what I understand about chameleons. Of course, if I ever got one or you get one, do tons and tons of research, more than some bald guy with a shiny head telling you that you shouldn't get one. But what I'm trying to say here is there are certain ones. Panther chameleons have shorter lifespans. They're a little bit more difficult to care for. Where Jackson's chameleon, there are many others that are a little bit easier to care for. So the thing is with most of them, you do need a screen enclosure, which isn't super difficult, but you have limited options. You either have to make one or there's a couple brands that make them, but they're just maybe a little bit different and you can't stack things on top of them. So if you're somebody like me who likes PVCs to stack on top of each other, this won't work for you. It's a minor thing, but also it's an arboreal enclosure. Another thing some people don't have room for. They seem like ticky-tack things, but again, this is why I would never... Don't you dare poo on me. This is why I would never get a chameleon, or so I think right now. And again, probably more ticky-tack things, but they do need that UVB, they need the basking spot, they need a dripper, a lot of them do need a mister as well. So it's just a little bit more equipment and a little bit more difficult for most people, and myself included, to handle. So Let's suppose that you wanted something like a chameleon, but not a chameleon. What could you get? You can get a false chameleon. Those things are very similar. They're in the anole family. They do have the articulating eyes, right? So the self-articulating eyes, the eyes that move in different directions like chameleons. They don't have the pincher hands because they're not actually chameleons. They are anoles. But I think these guys just make better, easier, a little bit easier. They're smaller. And of course, I'm just doing a broad comparison. Number 2, and maybe an obvious one, crocodilians. Just to me, I think that they are a way advanced level in comparison to what I am ready for. I am not ready for a crocodilian. I don't have the space. I don't have the knowledge or experience. I don't have the budget for the food bill. I don't have anything that is required for a crocodilian. I just don't. And there are some people who can care for crocodilians really, really well. Obviously, Snake Discovery, you all know that channel. They've got an alligator. They do a great job taking care of their alligator. Brian Barchuk actually does a pretty good job, Salt and Pepper. Like, there are other channels out there that do really well, and other keepers who don't have YouTube channels and things like that. So I'm not saying that no one can keep these, just not me. I don't think that I will keep a crocodilian ever. And there's a few obvious reasons, so we'll go over them pretty quick and I'll tell you what I'd get instead. Number 1, they're dangerous.
I am the danger.
Now, not all crocodilians are huge. There are dwarf varieties of crocodilians, right? But let's suppose you want an American alligator, right? Or you want to go for the shebang and get a saltwater crocodile. I don't know why you would do that, but some people do. If one of these gets a hold of you, it's going to be a bad day. It's going to be a real bad day. They might be, they might take off a digit and then you're working at IHOP for the rest of your life, So I just think that having all my appendages on me is one of the things I really like about life. So I'm just not going to get one, I think. Also, expensive to feed, need tons and tons of room. If they escape, it's going to be bad news bears. In fact, one town over here a few years ago, an alligator escaped, got hit by a car, and that's a good way for the authorities to find out everything else you have that's illegal and then take it away and make new bylaws and ruin it for everybody else. So I don't think I need to go any further. I'm never going to get a crocodilian, but instead, if you want something that's semi-aquatic, kind of big, but isn't going to destroy your limbs, what about a caiman lizard? These guys are, of course, there's no substitution. Oh, he's talking about caiman lizards, not crocodile. I know, I get it. They're not the same thing. But I think these guys are very cool. You need a much smaller space, although a large space. These guys did make my expert level reptiles list right here if you want to watch that. But I just think that they're more manageable if you have a giant space that is not super humongous giant. A lot of the times you can keep them indoors really, really well. I just think caiman lizards are super awesome, and they're as close as I'm ever going to get to a crocodile or an alligator. So there you go. Oh, if you keep hearing the rattling and like scratching and stuff, it's the reptile that I said I'd never get 6 months ago and eventually got, Buggy and Mappier. They're in the tank over there. All right, let's finish this off. Number 1, venomous stuff. Anything that is considered a hot snake or lizard, in fact. Now, there are a few laws as well, and that's why I didn't talk about laws, because they're not the same everywhere. So I know here I can't keep Gila monsters or beaded lizards, but I know lots of places in the States you can keep Gila monsters, or Gila monsters, I think they're actually pronounced, and beaded lizards, which are the 2 venomous lizards, by the way, and there's Komodo dragons, but, I mean, even if I wanted to, I couldn't. You can't keep Komodo dragons, people. And same thing with venomous snakes. Even if it was legal here, I don't want to. And here's the thing, it's a big risk. And even if I trusted myself, which I don't, to keep venomous lizards and snakes and never ever get bit, I like to hedge my bets a little bit. I think that I am not super risk adverse. I am a little bit risk tolerant, but not risk tolerant enough to have a venomous snake and not have antivenom. And antivenom expires, and antivenom is really expensive. And even if you can afford it, can you find it? Because here's the thing, I live 5 minutes from the hospital. Literally 5 minutes from the hospital, down the road. So even if they do send me a woohoo wagon down to my house, down there, and it's 7 minutes, right? It's a 7-minute round trip. Do they have antivenom for a pit viper, right? Even if it's a rattlesnake, which I'm in Canada, so we don't have them. We've got Massasauga rattlers, but they're not around here. So let's suppose that it's something that isn't from here. Do they have antivenom for a cobra bite, right? No cobras here. No cobras in North America. There is an elapid, coral snakes, I know, but the chances are no. So am I willing to take the risk of not having that proper anti-venom and knowing that the hospital doesn't have any and they're going to have to airlift me to Toronto? And even if they do have them, is it going to be expired? They're going to have to get it from the zoo. How long is that going to take? So there's just no way that I know that I'm going to live if I get bit by one. And I know you're thinking, well, I have hot snakes and I never get bit. Yeah, you never get bitten until you do. And then what? So let's suppose that I've got anti-venom, whatever, I don't care. You are taking the risk with other people as well. Let's suppose that you live in an apartment, a townhouse, so you're actually sharing a wall. And I know townhouses don't have the same ducting system and stuff, but hear me out. Let's suppose it gets out and into somebody else's unit, somebody else's home. Let's suppose that you live with your wife and your kids, or your husband or your roommate, whatever, and they don't want to get bit by venomous snakes. Most people don't, by the way. Are you willing to take the risk of somebody else getting bit if you, for whatever reason, even if you think you are the most responsible person ever, mistakes do happen and one of them gets out? Then what? I just personally don't want to take that risk. If you do, I got no business telling you what you should or shouldn't do. I just wouldn't do that. That basically sums it up. Most venomous snakes and lizards are not a ridiculous size. They're not ridiculously hard to care for. In fact, a lot of them are really easy to care for. It's the risk. It is 100% the risk. It is the number one risk because you could literally lose your life, although with crocodilians it's possible too. But either way, you're just having a bad time. And if you live in the great old US of A,
1776 will commence again,
where you don't have free healthcare like we do here, it's going to be really, really expensive. We're talking like it could reach 6 figures, if not high 5 figures. It's just not really worth it. So what would you get instead? What can replace a hot snake? Nothing really, but rear fang venomous snakes are pretty cool, and they do have a little bit of a danger factor. I've got hognose snakes, for example, and there's some snakes as well that have a higher damage level or higher risk level, although they're rear fang and they probably won't kill you. Mangrove snakes, for example, but there you go. 5 reptiles that I would never ever keep and the close substitutes that I'd consider. What did you think? Did you think this was a good list? Do you agree with the list? Is there something on here you'd personally keep? I take every video idea out of the comment section below, so if you want to see a video idea, toss it on down there. Maybe we'll make it for next week. And I want to say a special super duper thank you to the Patreon supporters. Everyone who watches the videos, I appreciate you. You guys are awesome. Some of you actually pay money to watch extra content, and that's super awesome as well. I like making it. I like being able to put these videos up early for you guys, exclusive deals on the merch, exclusive content. If you want to see stuff like that for as little as $1 a month, hit the Patreon link. We'd really support it, Diamond and I. And I think that's it. Plugged everything. Hit subscribe. See you on Thursday.